Good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this wonderful Tuesday. I'm sure all of you all are very excited for this masterclass today. And I can see quite a few of you who have started trickling in. So, to all those of you who are joining us today for this masterclass, please let us know in the chat window which city you're dialing in from. We really want to know where our participants are coming from and want to understand how many of you are really excited to know a little bit more about this topic and about the university. So in the chat window, very quickly, if all of you could let us know which city you are dialing in from. I am tuned in from Mumbai, and I have my fellow panelists here who are dialing in all the way from Milan in Italy. We have so great. I can see a few faces who've joined in from Chandigarh, from Solapur, from Mumbai, from Pune. Quite a few people, Madhya Pradesh. Wow. So people from the length and breadth of the country. Anyone who's dialed in from outside of India, please do let us know in the comments section below. So, like I said, we have a very, very exciting masterclass brought to you by Bocconi University. And yes, I'm sure all of you have guessed it right. This university is based in Milan, Italy. Very interesting topic in which we're going to be talking about the distribution of wealth and the role of rich in the society, getting a historical perspective from ancient empires to modern economy. So while the rest of you are still tuning in, and I can see close to 100 people and more who are dialing in, to give you a little bit of an overview about today's masterclass, you are going to be understanding how wealth distribution has evolved around the centuries, examine how the role of the rich has transformed over time, and also gain some insights into historical patterns, help you interpret contemporary debates on wealth inequality, taxations, economic policy, etc. Like I said, this masterclass is brought to you by Bocconi University, which is a renowned leading European institution for higher education and research in social sciences, particularly excelling in management and related fields. Bocconi is currently ranked 3 in Europe and 6 worldwide for the business management in business management by the Financial Times, and its academic reputation is further strengthened by its focus on producing cutting edge research and developing future leaders in business and economy. So I would like to thank everyone on the panel today who's made it here. Quick round of introduction. My name is Sabaha Thurzuk. I'm the Associate Director at Seed Global Education. We're a UK headquartered company which facilitates interactions between top global universities like the one that we have here with us today and prospective students like yourself, giving you a chance to connect with the faculty and the admissions team, understand what the programs are about, and therefore make informed decisions about your higher studies and career plans. Hosting the masterclass today is Professor Alfani, who is a full professor of economic history at Bocconi University, specializing in wealth economy, inequality, social mobility, and historical epidemics. He is an affiliated scholar at the Stone Center in New York and a research fellow at the Center for Economic Policy Research in London. His work, which is supported by major ECR grants, explores long-term economic disparities. Thank you so much, Professor Alfani, for taking out time from your busy schedule and joining us here today for this masterclass.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Professor. Along with him, of course, we have Veronica Sulo, who is the Graduate Recruitment Coordinator for the Guidance and Recruitment Team at Bocconi University. And of course, Richa Agarwal, who's the Regional Head for Southeast Asia Guidance and Recruitment at Bocconi University. Both of them take care of student recruitment, marketing, and everything that you want to know about their programs, their scholarships, what are they offering, their summer schools. So Veronica and Richa are your go-to people. Get in touch with them at the team in Bocconi so you get to know more. Great. I see we are close to 160 students who I am sure are super excited to know more about the masterclass. But before we get started, I'm going to quickly run my first poll question for this evening on the screen in front of you. What is your biggest concern or question about wealth economy, inequality? Is it economic instability? Is it the social unrest that it causes? Do you think there is a lot of political influence? Are there ethical considerations that you're more worried about or something else? So what is your biggest question or concern when it comes to wealth inequality? There are options on the screen in front of you. I am going to request everyone to please go ahead and cast your poll. I'm going to keep the poll running for a couple of more seconds before I hand over to Professor Alfani, who I'm sure you're all very excited to hear from. I am, and I really want to know more about this topic. But before that, let us know what is your biggest question or which is your biggest concern today. All right. With that, I'm going to end the poll and publish the results in front of you. So 43% are worried about economic instability, closely followed by the others. So thank you, everyone, for taking part in this poll. And with that, I now hand over to you, Professor, for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I am going to share my screen, hoping everything will work as it's supposed to work. Okay, I trust that you see my presentation now, right?
That's correct, Professor. You can start.
So what I will do today is some information about long-term changes. Sorry, I think I have a... Okay, can you still see me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, because my presentation seems to be stuck and I
Yes,
get...
it's not going further. Okay, oh, great. You're back
Okay,
online,
I
Professor.
am back.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. I don't know why this happened. Usually I'm
No
fine.
problem. Let's retry.
Okay. Now it even works. Can you see my screen?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Great.
So what I will do today is to give you an overview about long-term trends in inequality and then discuss a bit the role played by the rich in society. What you see in this slide is the information about the trends in wealth inequality, in particular the wealth share of the richest 1% in the last 2 centuries, for the 3 countries in the world for which we have basically the best information. All 3 are Western countries. I will talk to you about the West in general for reasons that I will explain better later. So, these countries are representative of the world, meaning that we see that inequality of wealth increases until the beginning of World War I, and then we have the so-called Great Compression of inequality, a long phase of inequality decline that in the first part is usually connected to the impact of the world wars, which also destroyed financial capital in the case of World War I, destroyed physical capital in the case of World War II. And then after this period, we have, we have a second phase of inequality decline that in Western countries is considered to be connected to the development of the welfare state system. So a greater provision of services to citizens paid for, very progressive taxation. Now, what I do in my research is to look at the very long run, actually, so beginning much earlier than this. And in this other slide, you have the wealth share of the top 5% of wealth in the 5 centuries before the modern period. So from the beginning of the 14th century until circa 1800. And what this slide overall suggests is that in the early modern period, so from the beginning of the 16th century till the end of the early modern period, we have continued inequality growth. And before that, we have a phase of inequality decline triggered by the Black Death pandemic in the 14th century. Now, we can bring everything together, get into this graph here, which is the wealth share of the 1%ers in the last 7 centuries or so, which is a pretty depressing graph to me, frankly, which has 2 possible interpretations. One is extremely depressing because, what these graphs might suggest is that in the long run of history, inequality always grows, except for major catastrophes. The Black Death in the 14th century and the world wars in the 20th century. So the point is, okay, so we have to accept that inequality will tend to grow in human societies, and we have to live with that because the cure is worse than the illness, because nobody wants to spread the plague in order to reduce inequality, of course. My interpretation is less pessimistic because I also highlight the importance of human agency, so the choices made by human beings. And in fact, if we think about the 20th century, the reduction in inequality in all Western countries in the 20 years after the end of World War II in 1945 suggests that, we can have inequality decline in the absence of catastrophe. But more importantly, the previous phase of inequality decline, that during the World Wars period, is also due to changes in institutions, in particular in fiscal systems, which moved from the beginning of World War One towards greater fiscal progressivity. So during the World Wars period, the richest were paid much more than the others, looking at their income, their wealth, their inheritances, and forth and so on. And in fact, if we consider the early modern period, so this phase of inequality growth from about 1450 or 1500 until 1800, that's also due to choices made by human beings, to human agency. It's in fact the consequence of increases in taxation in the context of increases in per capita taxation in the context of regressive fiscal system. And what is a regressive fiscal system? Is basically a system in which the poorest are taxed more than the richest in terms of proportion to their income or wealth. So the poorest were paying more taxes related to what they could pay, and this kind of pushes inequality up for many centuries. And then the point is, these were institutions, but institutions are shaped again by the choices made by human beings. So human agency matters. It's the choices made by the people, in particular, by the ruling elite, of course, which push inequality up during the early modern period. And so, when we talk about human agency, the choices made by individuals as a factor which shapes trends in inequality in the very long run of history, we are immediately talking about the people. And then the problem becomes, to me, so who were these people? In particular, who were the members of the economic elite? I recently published a book about the history of the rich in the West, and I argue that we have to disentangle, in the context of Europe, but I suspect other world areas are relatively similar to this. We have to disentangle three main paths towards wealth. The first is that of nobility/aristocracy. Why this is important? Well, because in the Middle Ages, most rich people were actually nobles. But it's also important because when we think about nobility, we think about wealth which has been inherited. It's not always the case. In fact, the guy who you see in this slide, Alan the Red, was a very minor noble, and he made his wealth by joining the conquest of England by the Normans, by William the Conqueror in the 11th century. So he's kind of the first one to make really the fortune of his family. But in general, the nobles have inherited their wealth. And for us today, this is a problem because we tend to think that wealth which has been made, created by the wealthy person, is somehow more legitimate compared to wealth which has been inherited. When we think about wealth which has been made, we think about the second path to affluence usually, which is that of entrepreneurship and innovation. The person you see here, Richard Arkwright, became the richest commoner, so the richest non-noble person in Britain, thanks to its patent on the water frame, which was one of the key innovations, or in the cotton sector, the key innovations of the British Industrial Revolution. And then from entrepreneurship, we have, I think, to disentangle finance, because finance has always been seen with some sort of suspicion in the Western tradition. Now, in the Middle Ages, most finances in Europe were basically forbidden. So, people had to find ways around the rules. By the end of the Middle Ages, it was entirely legitimate to be involved in finance, but there's still a strong stigma, right? And we know this, for example, because of people like this guy here, Francesco di Marco d'Attini. This was one of the most successful merchants of late medieval Italy. We know everything about him because entirely by lucky circumstances, we have his entire business and personal archive, right? So we know then when this person, which by the way, was able to become very wealthy, exploiting the opportunities opened by the Black Death, he was made an orphan by the Black Death. His parents died, most of his brothers and sisters died, inherited something, sold everything, moved to France from Italy and started trading between France and Italy, becoming extremely wealthy, right? But we also know that at the end of his life, towards the end of his life, at the end of the 14th century, he decided to also open a bank. He was already pretty old by then, and he was a very careful person. So, he wrote his business associates, what do you think about this idea, right? And all of them were answering him things like what you can see here. They were telling him, but why do you want to do it? you're already very wealthy. You have an extremely good name as a merchant from Florence. Why do you want to become a money changer? So in the jargon of the time, a banker, basically. Because if you do, everybody will think that you're a usurer, right? Because all of them are usurers. So the point here is, it was entirely legal to do what Datini wanted to do, but the social stigma against making money out of money, so against making money by lending it, was still very strong. And arguably, in the Western cultural tradition, the stigma weakened across time, but remains there basically until today. Again, weakened, but still present. Now, this also connects to the general issue of the position of the rich in society. I will begin with the super rich in particular and their position in a political system. And I will read you these two texts, which come from two different people. So the first one states this: the super rich are so unequal and exceed and overcome the others regarding political power so much, it is reasonable to think that they are among the others as God is among men. The cities which are governed democratically should relegate these people. They should send them in exile or banish them, as such cities try and push equality of all. The second text is the following: people with inherited wealth need save only a portion of their income from capital to see that capital grow more quickly in the economy as a whole. Under such conditions, the concentration of capital would attain extremely high levels, potentially incompatible with the meritocratic values and principles of social justice fundamental to modern democratic societies. So both these people were talking about democracies. They didn't mean exactly the same thing when they thought about democracy, of course. They are separated by many centuries. They haven't read each other. They're both French. When I present this physically, I ask the room whether somebody can get who they are. We can do this now. And the point is, these people are removed by 7 centuries. So the first is Nicolas Orem, who is in fact translating and adapting to its time the politics of the Greek philosopher Aristotle. And the second is Thomas Piketty, who published a famous book, Capital in the 21st Century, from which this text is taken. He published it in 2014. And they really point at exactly the same problem. And the problem is, if you really want to live in a democracy, because by the way, for Nicolas Orem, the democracies were not necessarily the best possible form of government. So he was saying, if you really want to live in a democracy, you can't have an excessive concentration of wealth. You can have people who are super rich compared to the others, because in that case, they will have an excessive political influence, and in practice, your polity will stop functioning as a democracy. This is a kind of problem that I would say, has been highlighted in the past many times, actually from classical antiquity until today, and which unfortunately resonates very well with very current concerns. There is a lot of debate about whether it is proper, for example, that the government of the United States includes, at the latest count, 13 billionaires, including the richest person on the planet, right? And the problem of the political influence of the super rich in today democracies is something that is a very, very present and current worry. Now, more generally, if we think about the role of the rich in society in Western countries, we have to consider that in the Middle Ages, generally speaking, theologians who were the main thinkers in that period, they were basically the scholars of the 11th, 13th, 14th century. And the Christian theologians argued, if you're a commoner, because nobles were not a problem. Nobles had a greater access to economic resources because of the will of God, because of the kind of position in society, which was also requiring them to protect their subjects. The problem was with the commoners, these people who, in certain parts of Europe, including Italy, where I come from, but not only there, where we have these city-states who become extremely wealthy with international trade. So in these areas, you have that commoners start becoming much wealthier than they ever were before. And this is the problem for the theologians, because why are they accumulating wealth which they could use to help the poor? If they didn't use that wealth to help the poor, it means that they were too attached to material things. In fact, they were all sinners, and their sin was avarice. So the theologians try and stop this process, but they fail. And already by the 15th century, we have that the problem becomes, how to find a role for the rich to play in society, right? Because the rich are simply too wealthy and too numerous to be dismissed simply as sinners by this moment in time. And so we have scholars who think about the rich in the 15th century. For example, Poggio Bracciolini, who is an Italian humanist, who start finding a social role for the rich to play. And Bracciolini writes a treaty about avarice or greed. He says, in the end, the rich have to be considered like a kind of private barn of money, which is necessary to a well-governed city, exactly like public granaries of wheat are necessary to face the threat of famine. And he says, if you have a crisis, will you ask for help to the poor? No, because they will not have anything to give you. What you need is money, basically. So you need the rich to be there because in a period of crisis, because of a plague, a famine, a war, we can ask them to help us. And here the point is the following. You can ask them kindly, could you please lend us something? And if they're unwilling, we can force them to lend us money, we can tax them, we can expropriate them. The point made by Bracciolini is actually that they have to be there, right? It's that they have to be present, otherwise you will not have anybody to tax in that situation, basically. The other function found for the rich in society at the end of the Middle Ages is that of magnificence. Magnificence is a nice, interesting word which literally means to do great things. Another humanist in the 15th century writes, the first in our age to renew the magnificence of the past, of the classical period, was Cosimo de' Medici, Cosimo the Florentine. And what is magnificence for this guy here? Magnificence is a way of transforming private wealth into public benefit. And he says, even if the rich simply build their palace in a city for their private use, the city will become more beautiful, right? So, we can still enjoy aesthetically these places from the outside. And on top of that, if somebody comes and visits our city, seeing all these nice buildings, they will think better of all the people who live here, we included, because of these private palaces. And then, of course, if the rich, instead of building their palaces, establish a public library, like Cosimo de' Medici did, he established the first public library of Renaissance Europe, or endow a monastery, or create an institution to care for the poor, that's even better, right? But the point is, again, even if they only do this out of self-interest, we will still benefit from it. Now, the case that this guy here, Gianni Pontano, makes is extremely interesting. Cosimo de' Medici. So, first question, was Cosimo de' Medici magnificent in the sense, did he do great deeds? Of course he did. You see here some of the buildings that he erected, and they are today museums. So it's actually true that we are still enjoying these places, these acts of magnificence to this date. But the problem is that, in fact, Cosimo de' Medici was performing both functions given to the rich in the 15th century. First, we have to consider that in 1433, he was exiled from Florence, which was a republic at the time, and he was charged with intending to rise above the other citizens. So the point is, he was charged with the intention of wanting to upturn the republican institutions. Problem is that Florence, the year following, loses a war against its enemy, which was the city of Lucca. If you think about Italy today, it's like being the enemy of your neighbor, basically. But many wars were fought between Florence and Lucca across the centuries. So, and then, as Florence lost this war, they risked going bankrupt because they couldn't repay the war loans with the spoils of war. So how do you avoid that Florence goes bankrupt? Very simple. You exile the political enemies of Cosimo de' Medici. You call him back right the year after his exile, and you ask him kindly to help, which he does, ordering his bank to buy the debt of the city. Right? And 1434, the year he does this, is also the year when he starts intensifying his magnificence. And here is the problem. So magnificence means to do great deeds. It is not munificence, which means to do gifts, literally, right? It's not giving, it's not generosity. It's a political claim. And again, another Greek philosopher, Plato, stated that magnificence is one of the virtues of the philosopher king. So it's the virtue of a ruler. And then the point is, the reason why Cosimo de' Medici was intensifying his magnificence is that he was making a claim which was very clear to his fellow citizens that he had a right to rule. And in fact, the moment he comes back to Florence from his exile is the moment when he becomes, in fact, the hidden prince of the city. And these descendants will become formally dukes of Florence, dukes of Tuscany, and so forth and so on. So he comes back to the city during a crisis. He helps the state, but by helping the state, he basically buys the state, right? Now, this might seem a remote past, but this actually connects, again, very directly to some current concerns. Because if we think about the debate about what we today call giving or philanthropy, right, a way which supposedly allows the super rich of today, the very rich of today, to give back to society. Well, you know, names are important. So giving, philanthropy are concepts which actually correspond to generosity. Philanthropy is a word introduced in the West at the end of the 18th century. And to be really philanthropy, it requires that nothing is received in exchange, not even simple influence, right? So the problem we have is that maybe we are induced to use words which are very neutral and talk about gifts, while in fact, part of that giving is closer to magnificence. It's used to build political influence. And this, of course, then connects directly to the problem I was highlighting, which is the problem of the super rich in a democratic context. Now, another big question is the following. Until when did the rich of the West perform the role of, helping communities in times of crisis? In general, it's very clear they were performed this role at the very least until the end of World War II, because, for example, they were systematically providing loans to Western states during the war itself, right? And they also lost a lot of money because of war, hyperinflation, so forth and so on. If we think, however, specifically at the role of saving their communities from financial crisis, the last case which can be made is that of J.P. Morgan, a great banker from New York during the banking crisis of 1907. And there is a nice famous story here. So, faced with the threat of a run-on bank, so actually people who would have gone to the ATMs, but to the banks themselves to retrieve their savings, fearing the collapse of the financial system. So, it was feared it would have happened after the weekend. So on the Saturday, JP Morgan convenes a group of financiers from New York in his private library, which, by the way, today is a museum, so magnificence. So he locks all of these people in the library and he tells them, you're not getting out until we find a solution, which they do. They coordinate their relational resources, their financial resources, are able to restore faith in the solvability of the system, and they avoid collapse. And we know from newspapers of the time, from private letters that Morgan was received, that many were hailing him after 1907 as the savior of his country, which was very similar to those used by the Florentines to welcome back Cosimo de' Medici 5 centuries earlier, okay? But the point is the following. This is no longer the Middle Ages. This is a modern democracy. This is the early 20th century. So this display of financial power fuels a very strong concern, which was there in American politics in the early 20th century, which was, by the way, a bipartisan concern, as we would say today. It was not something of the left or of the political right. It was kind of shared across the board. And that concern was about the so-called money trust, which was a small group of super rich financiers, which supposedly were already controlling the finances and the economy of the United States, and that many feared could have tried to take control the politics of the country as well. So, this display of financial power shows the power of the money trust. This leads to a public investigation of the money trust in 1912. This leads in 1913 the United States to establish the Federal Reserve System, right? The central banking system, basically. And the purpose was specifically to avoid that the country had ever again to rely on private super rich financiers in order to be safe from financial collapse. And this is also the period during which we have a stronger and more forceful application of antitrust legislation. When we teach a class in economic history, usually we economic historians tell the students antitrust legislation has been basically spearheaded by the United States. There is a famous law, which is the Sherman Act, introduced in 1890, so before this period. And this was done to protect the customers from, or if you want, the consumers, in fact, from the power of monopolies, which is correct. But there is also another reason why antitrust legislation was applied, and was applied ever more strongly from this moment on, from the early 20th century on. And this was a political objective. It was the objective of breaking the potential political power of the super rich in the context of the United States, which of course connects again to very modern concerns. The legislation is still there, but its application has become much weaker than in the past. And here the turning point is the lawsuit against Microsoft in year 2000, when Microsoft was found to be in violation of the Sherman Act, but it wasn't broken down, and it only suffered a relatively modest fine. So, this was kind of a signal to the tech giants of the 21st century that they could, become as large as they wanted, basically without any serious consequences. Now, I will conclude with a couple of slides, so another 3 or 4 minutes. What can we say about the super rich in times of crisis in the last century or so? Here you have the wealth share of the rich as 0.1% and 1% in some Western countries. The two red lines mark the beginning of the two greatest economic crises of this period. So the first, to the left, is the stock market collapse of Wall Street in 1929, which triggers the Great Depression of the 1930s. The second line is the bank crisis of late 2007, which from the following year leads to the Great Recession. And after the Great Recession, we also had the COVID-19 crisis in many European countries, such as my country. We had, in between the COVID-19 and the Great Recession, we also had the sovereign debt crisis. So, continuous crisis in the 21st century. But if you look at what happens to the wealth share of the richest, the dynamics are very different. Reduction after the first crisis, nothing after the second, and all the others which follow. So the point is that today the patrimony of the richest has become much more resilient against crisis than it ever was in the past. And what's the problem? You could say, okay, good for them. Surely, good for them for sure. The point, however, is that this resilience has also been obtained by avoiding to play the role traditionally assigned to the super rich in the West from at least the end of the Middle Ages. So, helping their communities in times of crisis, namely by paying many more taxes than all the others to foot the bill of the crisis. And so, this becomes a big problem, because instead of taxing more the rich, what Western countries did is to increase their public debt, which basically has the problem of, transferring to future generations the burden of the debt, and, leading to the question of who is going to repay it, given that across Western countries, we have the taxation is becoming ever less progressive. So ever less, ever more favorable to the richest components of society. And this is, however, a problem. Many among you highlighted social stability as one of the possible negative consequences of inequality. And this is, in my view, really on spot, because the point here is the following. The reason why at the end of the Middle Ages, the problem became to find a role for the rich to play without dismissing them as sinners. The reason for that was that they had to be better integrated in society, to be better understood by society in order to be made compatible with a stable society, right? And the point is then that, having a role to play in society, recognized role, is what allowed the rich to become ever wealthier, inequality to grow in a way which was, however, socially acceptable. In my view, again, the view of an economic historian who has been working on the last 7 centuries or so, it's a really long-term view, The moment you have that the rich stop playing their traditional role, you have the problem of asking then which role are they playing, because if that role is not clear, then I would say almost automatically society will become less stable in face of growing inequality, right? Because again, the question becomes, why are they becoming wealthier? Which kind of social function are they fulfilling? The final question I will ask you is the following: why is this happening, right? Because there is also a question here about why, considering that in all Western countries, the bottom of society during the crisis of the 21st century had been asking for making the rich pay more at the middle of the crisis. The question of why they haven't been made to do it leads to the issue of whether maybe their influence over politics in the context of what in theory remain democracies has been increasing over time. Yeah. And the symbolic event here is again an Italian bit of history. It's 1994 when Silvio Berlusconi became for the first time Prime Minister of Italy. At that moment, around that year, he was actually a 25th richest person in the world, right? Of course, today, this kind of question is even more relevant given the very strong impact of super wealth on the most recent American elections, and given the high and very strong presence of extremely wealthy individuals in the current American administration. I think I have used my time, so I will stop here and I will thank you for your attention. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Alfani, for a very, very insightful and wonderful presentation. I'm sure by looking at the sheer number of questions that have popped up in the Q&A box, you can understand how insightful it has been. But I would request everyone to please stay tuned with us right till the end. I'm going to now invite Veronica to give us an overview about the university. But before that, just before that, I'm going to run my second poll question for the evening. So very quickly, on the screen in front of you, my second poll question is, what stage are you currently at in your study abroad journey? Are you someone who's still in the application process, preparing or submitting applications? Are you someone who's just exploring options, starting to research about study abroad opportunities? You're someone who's probably going to apply in the upcoming years. Or are you someone who's already at a stage where you're shortlisting destinations, narrowing down your countries, narrowing down your universities? So very quickly on the screen in front of you, what stage are you currently at in your study abroad journey? If you could let us know, that is going to be super helpful for all of us here, especially for Veronica, who's going to now talk a lot more about the university, the programs, scholarships, funding, career opportunities, etc. So with that, I'm going to end the poll question and share the results. 68% of the audience present here today is still exploring options. They are people who've just started to sort of research about study abroad opportunities, followed by those who are in the process of the application submissions. And then there are those who are still looking at destinations. So thank you so much for all those who participated in the poll. And with that, over to you, Veronica.
Oh, here we are. So we are trying to quickly have an overview about Bocconi University that has been represented here in practice today by Professor Alfani. Very quickly, Bocconi University Milano in Italy, as Sabat anticipated earlier, is a very much recognized business school.
Sorry, Veronica, your
yes.
screen is not on full screen yet, so it's sort of difficult to read what exactly.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Okay.
Can you just go to the full screen option?
Yes, probably. Sorry, I'm not sure why it's not working properly. I'm trying to do this. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, now it should work better, in my opinion. Okay, now you can see it well, right?
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, Veronica. Unfortunately, we can't.
Okay.
Yeah, we can see you as well now. Thank you.
Sorry. So I was saying that Bocconi is a very much recognized university and business school, especially for the subjects that you can see here. So for accounting, for finance, for economics, and for marketing, both by the QS rankings. You can see we are first in the European Union in many of these subjects and among the 10 or 20 best worldwide. On the right, you can also see the business and management ranking, where we are 9 worldwide, right after Cambridge. One thing that is interesting, in my opinion, is also let you know that Bocconi is #1 university that receives the majority of the funds of the European Union for research. The European research grants are given by the European Union to the most interesting research project. And as you can see here, we have 34 at the moment funded by the European Union. This is especially a research university. What Professor Alfani just explained is also part of his own studies and research. So we conduct our autonomous and individual studies. Bocconi is made up of 15,000 students. Here you can see the campus just behind me, and it's more and more international, with around 40% of international students in the whole campus. What I wanted to focus today, besides admission process, is let's say one of the strongest features of our university, that is to say the employer relations and the contacts and the activities conducted with companies and institutions. We organize plenty of job fairs, both in Milano, but also in Frankfurt, in Brussels, in Paris, in London, all over Europe, to make sure that our students find a relevant job opportunity, not only in Italy with us, but in the rest of Europe, and why not in the rest of the world. We have a lot of students from India that after Bocconi Milano, they moved to Dubai, to London, to the rest of Europe, or back to India to start their own companies and enterprises. What I want you to be reassured about is wherever you are in the world, you can find Bocconi alumni who have chapters and help newcomers to settle down in a new country, and of course contribute to more job opportunities. This is why, and also this is one of the reasons why we are so high in the rankings, but we do, especially at master level, we do everything we can to make sure that students are connected to the proper job world right before graduation. On graduation day, almost 80% of our students already have a full-time job. The 36 work abroad percentages, in my opinion, is a bit misleading, and this refers to 2 years ago, where we still used to have master programs in Italian language. From this year, our master are totally in English language, also for Italian students, and so this will contribute to a higher number of students working abroad. If you look at the specific masters on our website, you can find for finance, for example, for economics, or for politics, the percentage goes up to more than 60%. Professor Alfani here today represents also the Master in Economic and Social Sciences, which is one where the percentage of graduates going abroad is impressive, especially for those who want to go, for example, for a PhD and continue with the academic career in the US, in UK. We have students at MIT, in Boston, at Yale, or at many other very prestigious institutions. Here I'm just showing you a list of the most important employers and companies that have some sort of partnership with us, not only to recruit our students for internship and full-time job offers, but also in terms of contents of what we teach and what we research about. What we teach is also very much related to what happens every day in all these companies and institutions, because we want to make sure that once we, let's say, tailor the profile of a student in the best way that allows them to match what the job market needs are. Professor Alfani, would you like to say something related to job opportunities, the career service, or in the specific case of the economics program? I know many are frequently offered very prestigious PhD positions.
Yeah, so Veronica is asking me this question because maybe she knows I've been the director of that program for 7 years, actually until right before COVID-19. So in the case of the Master of Science in Economics and Social Sciences, we have a very high prevalence of students who are admitted in in top PhDs worldwide, and I think this historically has been in between 30 to 40% of our graduates at peak, at least, and this is a very striking feature of this program. Something which is not well understood many times is that, however, those graduates, the graduates from that program, are also really in high demand by, for example, top employers in finance, but also top employers in business consultancy, like, for example, McKinsey. When I was the director, we were organizing events with McKinsey and other employers of this kind, coming to explain to the students specifically of this program why they were interested in them. And of course, they're also interested in graduates from other programs, but there always was this kind of special relationship with the ESS program. And in general, I would say that in terms of placement, the performance of the programs at Bocconi, in my past experience as a program director, is really, 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 really good. And also highly resilient to crisis, I would say.
Exactly. This is something that I've heard myself, for example, from employers in banking, especially investment banking in UK, where they appreciate the flexibility, the resilience, the time management that our students can show when they start working there. I can show you very quickly the full list of all our Master of Science programs, but there are a lot and I cannot describe all of them today. You see there are some in management, some in finance, economics, data science, and so on. My point, to follow what Professor Alfani was saying earlier, is that the majority of the programs are very flexible. You can start working in finance, coming from the program in finance, but also coming from the program in economic and social sciences, and why not in the more technical programs. We have corporate finance majors in the international management program or in the data science one. So at master level, our idea is to really approach the subject you are more interested in a specific way. You can study data science, and you can also study data science within the marketing program. So think very carefully also how you want to approach that specific topic and also the job opportunities afterwards. In fact, one thing I think we are very proud of is the fact that we have compulsory internship for all our master students, and I have no doubt in letting you know that we can find them very easily, depending on your own profile, on your wishes, on what you can do best and what you want to do. At master level, from day one, you have the possibility to meet a career coach specific of that program for finance or for economics or data science, but also an expert in the contacts with the employers and in the job market, either in a specific sector, finance, product, services, but also in a specific country. We have colleagues specialized in employers in France, in Germany, in UK, and so on. So at master level, everything is done to shape the ideal employee of the future. With compulsory internships, with majors, all students will have to study 2 languages and one will be Italian to make sure that you live the experience at your best, but also study abroad programs like double degrees and exchanges. Exchanges are 1 semester abroad. Consider that all our master of programs that I showed you earlier have the chance to attend a double degree. You can see some of them. The CHEMS is quite a famous network of universities, Sciences Po, London School of Economics, ESSEC, but also the Polytechnic of Milano, an engineering school ranked among the 15 best in Europe, as well as many other universities in Europe, in Asia, and in the US. Afterwards, I'm sure also with Sabata, we can give you all our contacts. Also, if you want to have a chat with some of our students or alumni, let me proceed with application procedures. We basically evaluate candidates on 4 elements. A more quantitative side, which are your transcripts of your bachelor, your GPA during your bachelor degree, and the test score. You might be familiar with the GRE or GMAT. We also have our own Bocconi test. If you do not intend to do one of these international standardized tests, you can book our Bocconi test tonight and do it tomorrow from your home, from your bedroom at home, quiet and without any problems. We also have a more subjective side of the evaluation, which is composed by your CV. So we are going to see the activities you've been doing, internships, extracurricular activities, your, let's say, also academic career, and also a personal statement. We call it a motivation letter, and in our mind, it's a bit less an essay about a certain topic, but it's truly about you, how you believe this program, this university, this study experience would help you achieve your dream job or grow specific skills, how you would fit in a European environment, why you are interested in studying in Europe, how it would open up to job opportunities. So it's really a letter addressed to the program director specifying who you are, what are your, let's say, features, how they can fit with our environment, what is your final goal, what would you make about this experience, how can it help you achieve your dream job, for example. While I show you some information about the test, the test here that you can screenshot, it's a 40 question multiple choice online test and you have 80 minutes time, so it's a bit shorter than GMAT, for sure cheaper and quicker than those tests, but of course it's only available for Bocconi. I wanted also to show us our deadline. So for academic year 2025-2026 you can still apply. in March, April, or May. You can apply 2 times. So my suggestion, if you just miss the test, you can still do it in the next few days, or you can upload your GMAT by 6th of March. Otherwise, we have April and May. Professor Alfani, sorry to mention you again, but I know in the past you have been reading and evaluating a lot of candidates. So do you have any suggestion for future candidates?
Well, I would advise them to be clear in their motivation letter about why they want to come to Bocconi, and to also try and be clear and show a proper motivation for the specific program you want to primarily address.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Alfani. This brings me to talk a little bit about scholarship, because those 4 elements that you will send for admission, so your GPA, your transcripts, the test, the letter, and your CV, are also evaluated for merit scholarships. At Bocconi, first of all, we have more than 1/3 of our students who receive some sort of financial aid. We have been working a lot with donors and alumni, with a total of 55 million euros contributed for student scholarships. You may have heard about the biggest endowment from a company to a European university. We just received 20 million euros by the Luxottica Group. It's a very famous Italian and multinational companies now doing glasses and sunglasses. As I was saying, you will be automatically evaluated for merit scholarship. This means that besides having a very good GPA and a good test score, again, work well on your personal statement. You might receive a full merit scholarship together with admission results, and this is usually awarded to students very high in the ranking, but also to particular students with a particular skill or with something peculiar that the program director believe can be a plus to enrich the class group. We also have full Women Award scholarships for female students admitted in the programs in finance, in data science, and so on. This is, let's say, not to be, how can I say, we want to be as equal and inclusive as possible. The idea of giving special awards to women is also related to the request from the job market in those specific sectors and fields where they would like to have more female employees. And so we try from the start to have a bit more female women in those topics. This merit scholarship, you might receive it together with admission. You don't need to apply for them. You have to work well on your application documents. In case you don't get one of these full merit scholarship, you can apply for financial aid and tuition fee, partial tuition fee waivers, depending on the family income. Later on, maybe we can also ask Richard to say something about documents, etc. But we have also Italian Minister of Education offices in India that help students putting together all the documents they need, not only for the visa, but also for governmental scholarships. I won't proceed much further. I've shown you different facets of our campus. Behind me in this photo, we have a lot of residence halls. Here in the map on the left down corner, you can see 3 little white squares. These are residence halls. And in that area, we will be hosting hosting the Winter Olympics in February 2026. So really walking distance from the campus, a worldwide event that will make our city very proud, but especially a lot of opportunities for students for accommodation as soon as the Winter Olympics are over, but also to work as volunteers or for internship. We already have a dean for the Winter Olympics, so I'm sure it will be an amazing opportunity for us. Here you can see also something about Milano. Milano hosts 8 universities, so there are plenty of international students, besides being the fashion capital of Italy and a financial hub. Consider that the majority of multinational companies in Italy are located in Milano, which is a bit more connected to the to continental Europe. The Lombardy region that comprises Milano is the second highest GDP per region in Europe after Germany. So I think there is a lot of business and finance in our city, and that's why our university is based here. I think I'm done with my presentation. I just have maybe, yes, you can come for the summer school, but maybe we can talk a bit later in case you're interested in joining us next summer. I want to make sure you have all our contact details in case you want to get back in touch with us. Maybe you want to visit us in Milano or you want to have an individual conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Veronica. Thank you so much, Professor Alfani. Thank you so much, Richa. Thank you, all of you. That has been very, very exciting and insightful. And I can see the number of questions that have come in. Richa, I know you've been answering quite a few of them. Uh, I know we've kind of hit the time mark here, but I'm going to request all of you to stay back a little and at least take up a few questions which the students have sort of asked, right? So, Professor Alfani, I would like to start with you. There is a question about has modern taxation and redistribution policies been effective in reducing wealth inequality compared to historic methods? And what lessons from history can policymakers today sort of apply to ensure that there is a fair and equal distribution of wealth? Of course, it's equal being a subjective term here, but what is the best that we can sort of do to balance that disparity?
Yeah, I would say that there has been a period, again, relying mostly on the experience of Western countries, so to connect to what I was showing you before, during which fiscal policies were pretty effective in reducing inequality of both income and wealth. This is very clear in the 20 years after the end of World War II, but again, also the previous period of inequality decline was due to that. Then, from the beginning of the 1980s, across the West, there has been a progressive shift away from these policies, which began with the fiscal reforms by President Ronald Reagan in the United States, then imitated by Margaret Thatcher in the United Kingdom, and then basically this became the tendency across Western countries. And you know, the movement was a movement away from relatively intense taxation and strong provision of public services, and from high progressivity towards low taxation, minimal state, or a much smaller state than before in terms of how much the state was intermediating the economy, and a flatter and flatter taxation. Regarding wealth inequality specifically, is also the period during which taxation of inheritances, which was very important also from the ideological point of view in the previous period. And why say, the reason I say from the ideological point of view is that taxing inheritances had the purpose not only of reducing inequality, but of trying to place the new generations on a more equal footing in terms of their opportunities in life, right? So, you know, taxation of inheritances has become really something opposed by the new ideology pertaining taxation. So, you know, this movement away from the previous model in some respects continues to this day. And my personal opinion on this matter is that we should stop doing this. So we should at least protect what is left of the progressive character of fiscal systems. We can't go back to the 1960s. It's clear the world has changed, but we have to stop this tendency, because otherwise we risk really getting into a world of even more extreme economic inequalities than at the beginning of the 20th century. And this might lead us all into trouble.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor Alfani, for your very insightful answer, I must say. Veronica, Richa, my next one's for you. I know, Richa, like I mentioned, you've answered quite a bit of the questions, but just for the broader audience here, let's talk a little bit about the kind of profile that you're looking for in an ideal Indian or international student that's looking to apply to any of the master's program at Bocconi. If you can give us an overview in terms of, let's say, work experience, language efficiency, CGPA, etc.
Sure. So first, you guys need to understand that the university is looking at a holistic profile. For all our MS programs, work experience is not mandatory, which means final year students or students, professionals having less than 3 years of work experience are absolutely eligible to apply to these programs, right? However, that said, given the credibility of Bocconi in the market at global level, we are definitely looking at academic rigor. So we will solicit the GMAT or the GRE or the Bocconi aptitude test score. And this is the best way to balance out a medium to an average academic profile. If you're not convinced with your CGPAs, here is an opportunity to showcase your academic rigor, because these programs are quite rigorous. So you need to showcase that you can handle the difficulty levels of the academics. That said, we do understand that there are a lot of students who come with a lot of extracurricular activities like sports and musics. Some students also have their own startups. So please do highlight all of this. There is a placeholder in the application form where you can talk about your additional skill sets or certifications that you have taken. Please project your profile in a very holistic way. We're not just looking at your CGPAs, but we're looking at whether you're the right fit to the university, which could be merit, which could be extracurriculars, and there is no right or wrong to it. There is no algorithm to crack this code. The best way to go about it is to be absolutely authentic about it, right? Do not, if you don't have a hobby, or if you've not spent or invested your time doing XYZ activity, please do not try to build it up in 2 to 3 months so that you make your profile meaty. Faculty members are extremely experienced. They go through each application thoroughly. They will be able to pick up those loopholes, those red flags. So be authentic, showcase whatever you have in the profile. There are enough and more placeholders through motivation letter, skill sets, etc. And I think you present your best case to us. Be creative.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Richa. So be yourself. And of course, if I may add, get started as early as possible. Do not keep things waiting till the last minute. So yes, get started. Whatever time it is the best time. Put your best foot forward. The team at Bocconi is always there to help you. Richa, if you would like to drop any emails or contact details in the chat window, please feel free to do that, right? Moving on to our next question to the panelist here. You know, we always speak about Bocconi being a real world leader and we've seen some of the rankings as well. So can you describe the college's approach as to how do you incorporate this real world business challenges into the curriculum, which is ever evolving? Professor Alfani, if you would like to speak about it, Veronica, Richa, if any of you could just contribute something to how does the college sort of make sure that you are staying in tune with all of the current trends going on and making sure that all of the graduates that come out of Bocconi are in touch with the current business trends in which they will face in the real world out there?
Veronica, I think the question is mostly for you, possibly.
Sure. Yes, as I mentioned earlier, 2 points I would make. One are the research projects that we carry on. I just give you an example. We had a COVID research lab during pandemic because we were studying in terms of statistics and analysis all the data coming through that particular period. And so this is an important point to research and study on what's happening every day in the reality, let's say in government or in banks or in companies. On the other hand, the very tight connections, relationships with the actual offices, enterprises, managers, and so on, who every day tell us something different. Here I just make a very different example. During fashion weeks in Milano, we host the fashion shows of very famous brands like LVMH, Gucci, and Prada, but it's part of relationships that we cherish to make sure also to teach very well about luxury and fashion businesses and management.
Right. Thank you so much, Veronica. That's really helpful. Moving on to our next question. Professor, this one is for you. Do you think financial contributions from organizations help in mitigating the impact of any upcoming financial crisis that a country or an economy might face?
Well, on principle, I would say yes. Of course, then it depends a lot on how this is done. But the historical experience is that international institutions providing financial support did, on balance, a good job of mitigating the problem, especially for countries which were constrained in terms of their fiscal capacity. Then, of course, the problem we are experiencing today is that there is a tendency which is pretty active, from the point of view of some specific and particularly important states, if you want, a tendency towards reducing the scope of international organizations. So for now, this hasn't touched really those providing financial supports to states going through trouble, but this might be expected for the future. So we have to wait and see, and I think actually we should strengthen the institutions for global cooperation in all areas, basically. So
Right. Thank you so much, Professor. I know with the time running out, this is going to be my last question, Veronica, Richa. So I'm going to take a few questions that students have asked and sort of generalize it. We know that for any international student who is going to be studying abroad, return on investment becomes a huge factor to sort of determine their next course of action. So in terms of that, can you speak a little bit about the career opportunities, let's say the career services that Bocconi University provides? What can an international student who's getting onto campus do in order to ensure that post their graduation, they are easily able to enter the job market and get the right kind of placements and make the right kind of network?
Well, if I can say something on that, we do our best to make sure that students are ready to enter the job market by the end of the 2-year masters. So let's say that, of course, each student has to grab all the opportunities that the university offers, but they are really plenty. Consider that last year we started on September 4, and on September 12, we already had an investment banking week where students could meet JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, HSBC, and many banks after 1 week after they started. So the focus to make sure that students grab the good job is there from day one. The other thing
Right.
they have to mention, and also anticipated earlier, the skills that we try to grow into students, not only the topics and the contents they have to study, but a lot of group work and research projects where they have to be active. They have to learn how to do presentations, how to work with a group of 4 different nationalities and 4 different backgrounds, and
Right.
make sure the group works to achieve the same goal. Okay, so I think we are also working to make sure students also have all the other skills needed to be successful in the job market.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Veronica. Just like your admission process, if you get on campus, get in touch with the career admissions team. Day one, do not wait for the last minute. And I know we have extended the time quite a bit. So I would now like to end this masterclass by thanking Professor Alfani, Veronica, Richa. Thank you so much, all of you, for your time and for joining us on this. I'm sure it's a lovely Tuesday there in Milan. And answering all our questions. To all our participants, thank you for your patience and for all of your wonderful questions. If you need any more information, reach out to us at Seed Global Education or to the team at Bocconi. Richa has also shared a few contacts. So good evening, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you once again, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Bye-bye.
See you in Milano.
See you. Ciao.
Thanks, Subhahat. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.